Yes, we're in Orlando. Amazing time to be here. This is the best time of year to be in Orlando. So hopefully everybody got to the keynote today. Everybody get a chance to check that out. It's exciting stuff, right? There's so much cool things happening with Epic, and we're really happy that you're all here at Unreal Fest with us to experience all the wonderful things we have going, and hoping the sessions are going well for you all and you're enjoying everything. Make sure you go to the party. The party's really, really going to be a good one. They always blow them out. I'm going to be spending the next 45 minutes or so talking to you about some of the things that are new in 5.6. So these are kind of the key features and benefits. It's different than what you saw in the keynote for the majority of it. A lot of that was, very, tech presentation. That CDPR project is ridiculously cool. We will be covering some of that in this presentation with different assets, but those concepts will be talked about briefly. And yeah, we'll spend most of the time running through it. We're not going to have much time for Q&A probably at the end. If you guys want to hear more or talk to us more, down in the expo, myself and some of the other Epic employees are down there, and we're always happy to talk to you. This project is loaded up on the UE demo machine, so if you want to come by and poke around and kick the tires a bit, feel free to come talk to us. So the things that we're going to be talking about today are performance, authoring, animation, so a bunch of usability, a bunch of workflow stuff, and just the overall arching message around 5.6 is it's kind of this message of maturity, right? Like a lot of the things that we've been doing with the tools have been to make them both faster, but also more productive from an art production standpoint. So a lot of the work that's gone into the animation system specifically is really geared around getting people to work very, very quickly inside of the engine. And of course, we're always striving to improve the developer iteration process, and there's lots of fun things that are, not the best demo things, but things that are definitely worth mentioning, and we'll kind of cover that off with a slide, a catch-all slide at the end. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is performance, and this is something that we've been investing heavily in the engine. Since UE5 has come out, every release we basically improve it and try to make it as faster, better algorithms, better use of resources on your computer. And 5.6 is kind of consistent along that theme. We've done a lot of really great things to improve hardware ray tracing. Tons and tons of work have gone into that to make it performant. And we're really striving to get to this 60 FPS as a default setting, on like a PS5, which is what that silver demo was running on. That wasn't a PS5 Pro. That was a standard PS5 that they were running that insanely large open world in and hitting 60 FPS. So a lot of the underlying architectural work that's been going into their last few releases really comes to an explanation point with 5.6. It's much, much faster when it comes to hardware ray tracing. So things like Lumen and all that just start to look really, really great. So let's jump over, and we're going to talk about device profiles. It's easy to profile to your devices now. Again, this developer process and iteration is getting more and more refined and smooth. So let's just jump over to Unreal, and I'll show you the scene I've been working on. So the scene is it's actually based in City Sample, right? So if I zoom up here and look at this guy and just kind of fly up, so it is a City Sample, and basically what I did is I grabbed this kind of T-shape, these first two blocks in this outer street, and I just started smashing in a bunch of assets that I got off of Fab. So all this geometry and all these assets came off of Fab, and it's just this really heavy, dense, intense scene. And the thing that's really interesting about this is City Sample's underneath this, right? So we've taken what we've done in UE5 back in the day, and we've layered on top of it a much more dense meshes, as well as a lot more stacked translucency and things like that. So we were doing those cube maps in the windows and things like that in the City Sample because that's what we could do at that time to run at that scale. Now here we are at 5.6, and we have the ability to do things a little bit more realistically. Like I've got tons and tons of geometry stacked behind these stores and things like that, and it just works, which is really, really pretty cool. Also in this scene, I've got two different lighting models. Right now, we're looking at the night lighting model, and obviously I'm using Mega Lights to do this. This scene has about 700 different ray trace lights inside of it, and there's a lot of emissive materials inside of here. Wherever there's the emissive signs, they're not everywhere because I didn't have enough time to place a million lights, but where a lot of those emissive signs are, I've gone through and I've put either area lights or little point lights to kind of give a little bit more illuminous into the scene, and it just makes it kind of feel a little more alive and a little richer. I've also got this cool day scene inside of here, and I'll just toggle that on. All I'm really doing for this is I'm literally just switching. I'm just switching between two different profiles here. So let's turn the night one off. We don't want to have double lighting. And all that's doing is changing the post-process volume, the volumetric fog, And really the sun angle, that's really the difference between most of these two things is just some different fog settings and some slightly different, obviously the angle of the light's slightly different and some slightly different tone mapping that I'm doing on the post-process volume. But they're really both very simple lighting environments, right? It's using sun-sky system, sky atmosphere, environmental fog to kind of give it that nice stacked look. And the end result is obviously a scene that looks awesome and it plays back extremely fast. I'm running on a really big piece of gear here. I've actually got a Blackwell Pro card in here, and right now we're projecting out in this room at 1080, right? So there's not a lot of pixels in that screen, and you can see a little bit of buzzing happening in those power lines. It's not too bad, and the reason it's not too bad is because I'm using a trick. In 5.6, we came up with a new thin geometry recognition for our temporal super resolution. So I'm using that foliage actor, that two-sided foliage on those power lines to kind of have that algorithm kick in and try to find that thin geometry. So it's a pretty good trick. Now, because I have such a powerful GPU in this machine, I'm actually going to go ahead and do something that's a little weird in a demo. I'm actually going to go and I'm going to overdrive my screen percentage because I just want it to look even better. So I'm going to put this up to 200%. And my performance is still going to be totally fine because, well, it's really, really fast in 5.6 now. So a couple of other things that are worth mentioning is fast geometry streaming. Hopefully I have my little sign working on here. Let's kind of zoom up here and see if this is going. Yeah, it is. Okay, so check this out. So what this is this is just a little MP4 that's playing back in this window. This is city sample, and this is cooked onto a PS5, right? So same hardware, PS5 playing it. That's the original City Sample 5 with this fast-moving camera, really fast-moving camera growing through that world partition. And you can see the world partitioning loading in on the lower left, on the lower side, and you can see how much faster that fast geo-streaming is with world partition in 5.6. So that's obviously got to be done in a cooked build, but it gives you an example of the types of performance improvements that we're trying to make with 5.6 specifically. For the PS5, which is well, actually not just for the PS5. This would work on any platform. But that fast geometry streaming is something that's super, super cool. So yeah, that's exciting. I think it's cool. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. All right, so the next thing that we want to talk about are some usability improvements that we've been working on in the UI. So kind of quality of life things that you touch every day. That are going to have an impact. So the first thing is this toolbar is changed on the top. Obviously, it looks a little bit different than it did in the past. And what it does is it gives you, and I'm going to actually turn off tooltips really fast because I don't want to see those kick on all the time. So tooltips, if you turn tooltips to 0, it'll turn them off completely. And if you go ahead and use this summons delay, which is a really good tip, if you want them to still pop up every once in a while, but you don't want them to come up like instantly, put the summons delay to like 3 or 4, and it'll be 3 or 4 seconds. So I'm going to turn them off for this demo just because I don't really want to see them popping up the whole time. But that summons delay is actually a really useful way of kind of keeping them around, but not being so aggressively in your face. So this top toolbar, what we've got going on here is a couple things. Basically, you've got this little catch-all, right? So this catch-all has the ability to represent all the different functions for your translation, rotation, scale, snapping, displaying sockets and things like that. The most common ones are also pulled out here into the top bar where you can say, show me my grid snapping. Is it on or is it off? What percentage of grid snapping do I want? Same for rotation. So we brought the most common things out to the surface here. And we've made some slight changes over here. Like there's this use default scalability. So if I went to cinematic on this, right, you're going to see, okay, it still looks good. My performance is actually still, I'm probably going to run it like this actually for the rest of the demo because it does look really good. But you get this visual cue right now that's saying you're no longer on the epic defaults. And that's kind of what we're thinking is that kind of path to 60 where you're going to get 60 FPS for device profiles. If you're on epic, it should be like looking really good and get you to 60 FPS. So that's the goal. So that's why we have this like quick reset button if you've made a deviation. Now for this demo, we'll just leave it on cinematic because I think I have the bandwidth and the performance to do it. So why not? Another thing that's really interesting about this toolbar is I mentioned this is kind of a catch-all, right? Like it has all the stuff that's being redundantly displayed here. And the reason that it's cool to have this catch-all is if you had like a small window, so as I start to scale this, you'll notice the way things stack up in scale and actually all the windows in Unreal now it's just more intelligent in its ability to deal with kind of the redistribution of data inside of your display or inside of your viewport. So as I pull this, the outliner and the details panel over, you'll see that it starts to push into that, and those guys just kind of nicely disappear, but I still have access to those tools with that cascading dropdown. And the same thing will happen over here. You can still go back, and as the ones on the right start to disappear, there'll be like a little drop-down arrow that will let you get into them. Now you'll also notice that the content browser is acting slightly different. The way that the filters and things like that stack and tile also works in a much nicer way than it used to, as well as if you display objects, filtered icons, things like that, we've changed that behavior slightly too, so that they also redistribute themselves and stack themselves up in a really nice way. Now, another thing that we've done is we've added in more levels for the actual icon display. So we have more granular size changes that happen. So you can use a control key and the middle mouse button to kind of scroll up and down through this. So you can see there's a lot more control there. And notice what happens when they get really small. The text disappears and you just have a color bar on the bottom that lets you know what type of things they are. So if you're looking at big 200 texture maps in a folder or something like that, you don't have to see all that extra little thing that's saying, hey, this is a texture map. Once you get down to the small icons, you don't need that information. So these are the types of things we've been working on in the UI to make it just a little bit more elegant and a little bit nicer to use. So I think with that done, we've kind of talked about performance, and we've definitely talked about, let's jump over to our slides. We've definitely talked about simplified user experience. So the next thing that we want to talk about is Metahuman creation. So the Metahuman workflow now lives directly inside of the editor. I think you guys probably saw that in State of Unreal. It's really awesome, and it's really, really fun. We've also improved the Metahuman process, right? The metahumans look better. The fidelity is higher. We have 4 hero metahumans now, presets that are insanely high texture maps. The way we're synthesizing the textures is much better than it was previously, as well as some of the kind of base geometry and things like that are staying the same, but we're doing a better job of fitting. So if you're doing like a mesh to metahuman, something like that does like a fit of like a custom piece of geometry into a metahuman, the ability for that algorithm to do that shrink wrapping and fitting is a lot tighter than it used to be. So very, very big fidelity improvements to metahumans. And the tools are right in the editor, which is really pretty awesome. So let's just go ahead and I'll walk you through that really fastly. So I'm going to turn off that filter for the textures. So the process, I've already made a bunch of them. Like I've already got a whole stack of these little guys inside of here. And these are the 4 that are the most highest visual fidelity. So this lady, this guy, Bo, and then so the two ladies and 2 gentlemen. And the process is literally you just right click and you say metahuman, create new metahuman. Now I'm not going to do that because I've already done it. I'm just going to pull up an editor of a character. Actually, we'll go ahead and do it. Why not? No reason not to do it. Metahumans, create a metahuman character, and you know what? I'm not even going to name it because I don't feel like it. It's fun to just be crazy and not name stuff. Let's bring this guy up. So when you load up the Metahuman Creator window, it's an editor inside of UE. Yay, awesome. We're not on the internet. Pretty standard. Look and feel if you've worked with Metahuman before. So if we want to get to the material, if we just touch on this, as soon as we do that, it loads in a base texture of 1K and 2K. You can always download higher res texture. So the default display off the bat is kind of just built in. It's low res. If you want to get the higher res footage for each Metahuman, you can go ahead and pull that down just like that. Now there are a bunch of presets inside of here, as I mentioned previously, and we'll just grab this guy because he's kind of fun to play with. We'll load him in. And directly inside of the window now, we can do all the things that we used to do with metahumans, like jump into the head, and you could start sculpting or deforming or transforming the points on the head, blending between multiple heads. So everybody here has tried Metahuman, played with metahumans, experienced them. Yeah? No? Maybe? They're cool, and they're only getting better. And this guy only has a 1K texture, so I'm going to just kind of walk you through a few of the other things you can do with him. So let's zoom out and check him out. So he's been putting on, he's been eating, he's a healthy boy. So what we want to do is take him to the gym. We're going to go to the body, And inside of our body now, you could choose multiple presets and do that same Metahuman blending thing with a little triangle where you can pick and choose influences. But we also have a new parametric model for the body. So really amazing. And you'll notice that the clothing on this character conforms and fits to him as I make changes to his body. So we have a new clothing type. You're going to be able to make your own clothing, throw them on Fab, sell them. The Metahuman license has changed also, which is worth mentioning. So if you're using Metahumans, it's just a standard UE license. So you can make a Metahuman, take them into Maya, do something crazy with them over there if you want to. It doesn't really matter. We're going to basically make the terms a little bit more flexible for users. So if we drop down his weight a little bit, give him a little more muscularity, and you can see as I do this, the clothing kind of comes in there and it just starts to fit. It's just really, really fun to do all of this type of work with the Metahumans. So after I've done that, the next step would be to go ahead and say, create a rig. So I've already done that. And I've already downloaded the high-res textures for this character, and it takes a little bit of time to process and do all that. Not a lot of time, but more time than we have in this demo because I'm trying to plow through a lot of stuff. So let's go ahead and close that down and open up a guy that's already rigged. And we're gonna live dangerously here. We're gonna try to do some real-time metahuman capture, some facial capture. There's lots of different ways of animating metahumans and driving facial animation as well as body animation on them. Oh, hopefully this guy's gonna come up. I double-clicked on him. Yeah, here he comes. It takes this. Thinking, processing. So I have an insanely fast GPU. Seems like my CPU might be like chugging a little bit there trying to open this dude. So we have multiple ways of animating characters, right? We've got the traditional AR kit, right, that used an iPhone that uses a depth sensor. We've got the ability to use the iPhone with the depth sensor to record video and have Metahuman animator process it. That's going to be a really high quality film grade solve, as well as a multi-camera system, kind of the same workflow for that, so depth-based workflows. And in 5.6, we now have a new video-based workflow. And that video-based workflow would let you load a video background plate and have it in real time, very low latency for what it's doing, which is ridiculous, solve off of a video or a 2D plate. That same technology can also be used with this simple off-the-shelf web camera, which I have over here. So I've got this. And we're going to see if it's actually going to work. So I've got this camera, and what we're going to do is we're going to use Live Link to do this, and I need to go ahead and just go into Windows, Virtual Production, Live Link, and we don't care about ARKit. We'll blow that away, and we're going to add a source, and we're going to add a Metahuman video source. And on that guy, we're going to grab this guy, this little camera, and we're going to say connect. And we'll put it up here. Now, this is literally the worst case scenario with the lights coming at me. I have glasses. Well, the glasses don't really matter, but the reflections on the glasses do matter. And those lights are blowing out that. So it needs to see my eyes. So hopefully it's going to pick up on my eyes with the bright lights tagging me. And I also have a hat on. So not idea at all, right? Like literally not idea. So let's go ahead and connect. And I might have already done that. I don't remember if I did. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. So yeah. Yeah, it's pretty, dude, come on, that's cool. Yeah, hey, I got a clap. All right, I'll take the clap. So that was high risk because I really wasn't sure if it was going to work. I'm glad it did. Okay, so let's let's close this dude down. He's gone. No more guy. And I also want to make sure I turn off Live Link because we don't want that running in the background. Yeah, so I think that's everything we wanted to talk about with Metahumans. Let me just double check and make sure that we covered everything off. As I said, there's a whole Metahuman team downstairs in the expo. Go hang out with them. They'll show you all kinds of really cool stuff. This is a speed run. I'm going to go through stuff as fast as I can to try to cover off as much as I can. And I'm from New York, so I talk fast. So non-native English speakers, I apologize. The internet out there, I apologize to you all for how fast I'm going, but it's the way it's going to be. All right, animation. We are pushing hard to make Unreal Engine the place to go to animate characters. Whether you're doing real-time work, nonlinear offline animation, we want to make a world-class animation system. We've been talking about it for several years, and we keep chipping away at it, and it's getting crazy. It's just getting nuts. The things that we're doing, both from a refinement and usability perspective, as well as from a that's just insanely cool perspective, we're doing some really, really fun stuff. So let me jump into UE and show you some of the things that we've been working on. So I can just hit F10 and kind of get full screen here. Where is my guy? I don't think I have him on yet. You know what? I gotta go over here and just do this. Let's go to bike. Where are you, guy? I forgot where I put the, oh, there he is. Okay. So I got a metahuman, another metahuman, right? He's got a bike. He's kind of doing this thing where he walks up to this bike and he gets onto it, right? Like pretty straightforward. Now, what we have now in 5.6 is a really nice workflow for doing editable motion trails. So if we go ahead and just grab this guy's, let's just hit G and get our rig up. Let's grab this foot. Okay, so I've got that foot highlighted. There's the keyframes on that guy, and we're just gonna look at the sequencer curve so we can kind of see that. So with that foot highlighted, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up here, and we now have this editable motion trail. So I've got some options set on this, so I've switched it from the default. I switched the style to dash, so that's gonna be every other frame. It's gonna kind of give me a zebra stripe going down it. It's more visually representational of what's happening with that. I've increased the size of it a little bit, and I've increased the size of the keyframes, and you can track things that aren't keyed. You can track any point on this character, and it'll make editable motion trails, and you can have multiple editable motion trails inside of there. So keep that in mind when you're working with it. And I think I have it set to show 10 frames before and 10 frames after. 17, a little bit more, but still pretty good. So I'm actually gonna pen this guy, and with that penned now, you can see, ooh, let's just hit the F key and spin around that. You know, there's my editable motion trail in three-dimensional space. You can also have the motion trail be in camera space, which is really pretty awesome. So there you have two options for the way it's displayed. In this example, it's showing it in this 3D space. And obviously, as I scrub through my time slider, it's going to kind of wipe on and off. Actually, it looks like I don't have, let's set frames. We want that to wipe on and off. Yeah, so it kind of is now giving me this kind of before and after, so it's a little bit easier to see. And then of course, you know, at any point I can go in here and I can grab like a keyframe on this guy, make a change to it. It's going to update that curve, update the position of the foot, and allow me to manipulate this in three-dimensional space. So quite similar actually to the Maya's editable motion trail tool, which is good because that one we did a really good job on back in the day, and this one's even better. Yeah, so that's some of the things that we've done to make working with animation data a little bit nicer. Now you'll notice that inside of the sequencer, when I go to the curve tool here, I now have my tween tools directly in the UI. You can actually have that be a tear off and have a separate floating window for the tween tools too, so you can actually get two tween tools in there at the same time. So we've done a lot of work on that. I'll show you that in just a second. We've also added things like a lattice deformer for keyframes. We've done a lot of work on cleaning up the way curves are displayed and the way you interact with curves when you compress points down, how they stack on top of each other and delete each other and things like that. So lots of little things that are quality of life that you're going to feel right away when you start playing around with it. Sequencer is had some really cool stuff done to it. You can use Sequencer to do basically some really fun things where you can have multiple languages inside a sequencer. You can have multiple timings inside a sequencer, and we can use the motion warping stuff that we've been working on, so the blending and transitional warping, to go from gameplay into cinematic play. So go from a gameplay animation into a cinematic take, have that cinematic take happen, and then go back into gameplay. So that's what I'm going to show you guys now. We're going to jump into Pi, and yeah, hopefully it'll work. We'll see. I did hit play before you guys came in here. That's what we were waiting for. That's why we started 2 minutes late, because I was waiting for it to turn on and do all of its magic, and it should only take like, hopefully a few seconds to start up. Yeah, okay, cool. And hopefully we have audio. Do we have audio on the computer? It does take a little second for the audio to kind of catch up. Okay, there we are. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I've got another metahuman over there. Oh, and so as I said, this is based in City Sample, right? So inside of City Sample, we have a whole mass system for crowds, and the cool car system was done with mass, the traffic lights, all the blinking lights, all that stuff. So we just hijacked all that and shoved it onto these other kind of older looking cars. So it doesn't look like City Sample, but trust me, it really is City Sample, just with like a layer of coolness on top of it. So let's go ahead and run this character up into this spot. This is my transition, so I'm going to transition into this thing. And this is using a procedural camera. This is the new one, 5.6, highly experimental, highly experimental.
I don't have any. Well, my favorite is the giant octopus.
Dude likes giant octopuses. Man like me, I like giant octopuses. They're the best. So he kind of does that, and all that little drifting happening, if that metahuman was taller, that would update automatically because we use a procedural camera for that. So we saw two things in that. We saw, actually three things. We saw him run in there, hit a trigger, go from gameplay into a cinematic move. Then we saw the camera cuts happening with a procedural camera mover that kind of tracks his neck essentially. So if he's small or short, it's going to automatically compensate for that for your character. And we saw dialogue. And the dialogue is actually an important part because in Sequencer, we've added the ability to have languages. So if you've got different dialogue, often you're going to have different lengths. So you don't want to have to re-author everything completely from scratch. You want to use the same exact logic, the same exact clips inside a Sequencer. You just want it to be adaptive and work. And that's what we've done here. So let's just go ahead and escape out of this, and I'll show you that really. Ooh, got dark. What the heck happened? Oh, it's because I'm in the daytime scene, and then that plays in the nighttime scene here. Let's change that. Let's go to night. We're gonna get rid of the day. And we're gonna go to night. Yeah, he was in night, right? I think he was in night. I can't remember what I did. Anyway. My mind is like a marshmallow. Yeah, cool. So we've got this. Let's go into the details for that guy. Let's bring the sequencer up. And this is the magic, right? So look, here's our clips, here's our dialogue. That's how long it took, right? We're going to switch to Japanese. Everything retimes automatically for that language. So now when we go back and play it, we're going to get the exact same thing, but it's going to take longer because it's longer in sequencer, and it takes longer to say the dialogue in Japanese than it does in English. So we're gonna do the same move, and we're gonna hear him discuss why giant octopuses are super rad in Japanese. If you guys notice, there is a giant octopus up there. This guy's actually like one of the better street artists in my environment. So he's spray painted that big giant octopus in the upper right-hand corner. I love the Manny. He's just like, okay. And again, that little procedural camera move that's just tracking his head. Yeah, so that's some of the improvements we've done to Sequencer for gameplay, which is, and then it transitions back out, and I'm back to where I can run around and do my stuff. So pretty cool. And then look, here's this cool octopus. Yeah. All right, next thing that we're gonna do is get back to that tween tool and talk about control rig and some of the improvements we've made. Not improvements, like some of the added functionality that we've made to control rig. We've added the ability to have physics layer on top of control rig, right? So control rig physics is a thing in 5.6, again in the highly experimental category, but oh, so cool. This is like the coolest thing you're gonna see. Well, you saw Silver and the State of Unreal, so it's not the coolest thing you're gonna see today, but it's the coolest thing I'm gonna show you today. We'll leave it at that. Yeah, so we'll switch over to this guy. All right. Bam! And if I grab one of these and start moving it around, it's a control rig, so that's like an end effector. And on that control rig, we have it set so that it stretches, right? So it's got the stretchiness. And down the length of each, there's like 18 bones down each tentacle. Each of those bones has a rigid capsule, essentially like a rigid, but it can scale, so it's not like truly like a rigid, but it's got a rigid body kind of embedded down the length of that. And that gives you the ability to do these really kind of crazy things, right? So as I move this around, you can actually tie it in knots, and you can do all kinds of really fun, interesting movements with this guy. Now, actually one of those legs is tied in a knot. So while that's happening, right, the other thing that you can do is you can go in and adjust on each one of these. We've got some controls, so I can basically say, you know what, let's unlock that leg. So that's just free. It's got a gravity, right? So I could zero out the gravity or make the gravity negative. It's going to rise up, or you have lots of control on that. And then there's this harmonics, and what the harmonics does is this is kind of basically just, you can see that little curve. That's a goal that those rigid bodies are kind of trying to get to. It's sort of like a little springy system that they're attached to, and it's just kind of recursively rotating down the lengths of those bones. So you start to get these really nutso movements, and it'll tie itself in knots. It'll wrap around itself, and this is all happening in real time, right? So it's like, as an animator, to try to animate tentacles moving like that would be super, super hard. This is pretty similar actually to what the setup that was done for Davy Jones back in the day. So the folks that were working on this and helped set this up had a play that contributed part to that original Davy Jones rig. So this is pretty similar to that. And it's really, really cool. It's actually even more art directable. So I could go in here and I can grab like this one and say, you know what, I don't want it doing the harmonics, but we'll just unlock it so that it kind of flops around. And if I grab this character and I start moving him around, that's cool. I've actually got some keyframes on there, right? So we can transition between these poses. He's going to go up there and interact with the car. And this is where the tween tools come in. So I can use all these different tween tools to adjust that position. So if I do blended neighbor, it's going to try to blend more toward the front key or blend more toward the back key. So all these little nice tween tools work on multiple keyframes. Also, you can use it to inject keyframes in between things. And all of that happening on top of control rig with the physics. And I think this is so cool. I could spend all day looking at this guy. I don't know. I think he's really, really fun. And then there's some other stuff that you can do. Like you could turn off the control rig or the physics rig, so it just goes back to being a standard control rig. You can turn that back on. You can disable or enable the dynamics. So lots and lots of control. And if I turn on visualize, you'll get a sense of all those little capsules going down the length of each of those tentacles, right? And yeah. So come by the booth if you want to look at this rig more in depth. I'm happy to walk you all through it and show you some of the other really fun, super cool things that you can do with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about PCG and some of the things that we've been doing on PCG. So lots and lots have happened for the procedural workflow inside of Unreal. It's faster than it used to be in the way the core system works underneath it. So it's not like a completely rewrite or anything like that. It's just lots and lots of improvements that add up to a much faster iteration process, as well as expanded functionality. The ability to spawn things on the GPU, for instance, is just a lot better now. So you can start to do things where you would have traditionally been using, sort of the old traditional open world workflows inside of UE, for foliage and things like that. In landscape, the landscape tools with the foliage tools and things like that. You can now actually do that cost effectively and in a small memory footprint and very performant by using GPU spawning with PCG. And we've got some really great biome tools inside of UE also that have also had some improvements. So we're going to jump in now, and I'll walk you through this. Again, very high-level overview of what's going on here. If you want to do a deeper dive, you can come talk to myself or some of the other people on the demo pods, and we'd be happy to kind of to dive in a little bit more in depth and show you what's going on with that. So yeah, with this guy going, we can just actually close that down. We don't need to do that. And I think I've got my stuff set up over here. I do, yeah. Oh, so this is pretty fun. I also went through, and the original city sample had like sticks for trees, because that's what we could do in the time we had, and also like performantly. But this is actually the trees that are taken from the Electric Dreams demo that we did. So I think that was probably 5.3 was Electric Dreams. So I went through and found all the blueprints and replaced all the actors in the city sample, like stick trees, with these Electric Dream trees, which are awesome. So I'm taking two sample projects and smashing them together with all that stuff I grabbed from Fab. And again, that thin line rendering support, that two-sided foliage thin line rendering support in 5.6 just makes the foliage look better. It does a much better job of kind of, dealing with that aliasing issues and things like that. So a lot of talking about trees, and I'm not really demoing trees, but what I am demoing is PCG and how we can use it to make shipping containers, because why wouldn't you want to make shipping containers procedurally? I don't know. It seems like a good idea to me at the time. So a couple things. First thing is just from a workflow perspective, like if we go back to our content browser, and I just kind of come down here. Again, city sample, right? Tons and tons of folders. If I right click and I say create a PCG graph, we now get a pop-up, so kind of similar to like Niagara, right? So we have preset templates that you can start from. They're great learning tools, right? Like you can jump in there and rip them apart and see how they're done. Now, one of these is this PCG create geometry, create mesh, right? I took that and I made my own derivative of it. So mine is based off of that, but I added in the functionality like I modified it to work with to make shipping containers. But it's based off of that create geometry one. So I'm going to just start from this. So we'll just say initialize from template. We'll call it PCG graph demo. Hopefully this will work. I spelled it wrong. That's okay. No one cares. We double click on this guy and bring it up. Here's the graph window, and I'm actually going to go ahead and just drag this into our environment also. boop, boop. All right, cool. Look, it made a procedural shipping container for me, right? Just like that. Notice that as I move it around, it updates the doors. They're dynamically kind of just getting random rotation. So every time I dirty this, it's going to give me a different rotation on those doors. So I'm going to walk you through the graph and talk to you about what's going on here, right? So here's our graph. There's been lots of improvements to the graph editor. The first thing that you're going to notice is there's a viewport in here, right? So you can visualize what you're working on for certain things in the viewport. So we're doing two things in this graph. We're doing some procedural generation with dynamic meshes, right? Like what I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to make the shipping containers be different lengths, right? And I didn't want to just like try to stack up different numbers of like vertical beams or something like that because I liked the way the texturing worked. I wanted to just use a Boolean operation to chop off the end of it and then cap it with another piece of geometry. And that's what we kind of have right here. Let me just pull this back down. I've got the original container over there. I've got this back end that I just kind of use the modeling tools to smash together, and then we've got the door. And what I'm not displaying is I also have a polygon cube in there that I'm using as a cutter. Literally, it's just a polygon cube that I called cutter that's going to do a Boolean operation. And so what we can do is if we look in here, this stuff right here, this was the original. The first thing we're doing is we're looking at the editor and we're saying, all right, cool, let's create some dynamic meshes from it, right? So we're going to do the static mesh from element, and I don't remember which one this is, but let's just double click on this. Yeah, so that's the original piece of geometry, right? So I'm getting that, I'm turning it into a dynamic mesh. I can visualize it in my viewport. Yay, awesome, cool. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm getting this guy, which is my cutter. Then I have my little door, right? So those are my three pieces of geometry that I want to work with. Now I'm doing just a transform, and on that transform, I've got this thing called cutter. So that's just giving me an offset, and this is actually a parameter. So we've got a window now that pulls all that the graph parameters out into a separate window. So it's a little thing. You could do this before, but it was buried in the details panel. It was hard to get to. So now with the graph parameters, you get all of that exposed at the surface level for you. You can rearrange it. You can drag and drop them into the graph to start using them and like doing like a get from it or something like that. So the workflow has changed substantially inside of this. We're not doing anything new here per se. We're just cleaning up the workflow and having the ability to visualize it. So then we go in here and we do this transform. We're kind of moving it in space. I do the Boolean operation. So I cut off the back, and then that guy is transformed to the same spot. That one transform node moves the cutter as well as the back wall. Their pivots are in the same spot. So then we just, kind of merge that stuff back together. This is a dynamic mesh still, right? And then on top of that dynamic mesh, like I want to spawn the doors. And the doors don't need to be dynamic, so I'm just using standard static meshes for those, right? The idea is you use dynamic meshes where you need them. You use static meshes where it's going to be more performant. It makes more sense to use a static mesh for the doors because they never change. Now, after you've made these dynamic meshes, you got to make a choice. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to spawn it at runtime? Do you want to save it off into be an asset in your content browser? And that's what we want to do is we want to save this out. Like once I've set the size of this guy, I want to save it, right? So you'll notice that the save asset is like right here, right? So I turn on save asset. It's going to bring up my thing, and I'll just say save. It might be unhappy because I'm not on Perforce. Yes, that's fine. So I've saved that out. Cool, now it's no longer dynamic, because once we do that, there's a little bit of logic that says, oh, okay, cool, you've saved, forget the dynamic part of the graph now. Now it's just literally an asset that we're bringing back in, right? So we bring that asset back in, and we use that to find its sockets. So that basically on the original static mesh, I have sockets, and the sockets are going to let me position my doors, right, as well as the graffiti on there. So we're going to use that to then do this sort of standard PCG workflow on the top. Now, the way it's set right now is it's saved at the disk, but every time I make a change to that blueprint, like if I drag that blueprint, it's going to resave it. Every time it's dirty, it's going to resave it, right? So to get around that, because it's a demo, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically tell it to stop saving it by unenabling that. So now what I've got is, my mesh comes in, I've got this static mesh over here. There it is with its cut thing, and then inside of here at any point, if I wanted to, I could start to do some changes to this. So we're grabbing our door sockets. I'm doing I'm basically finding point 1 and point 2 and deeming those doors, and from that spawning the doors, and then point 3 is my socket, index 3 is the socket for the graffiti, so I spawn off the graffiti. Now what I want to do is for these static spawner of this mesh, and I want to make sure it's a static spawner for the mesh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, yeah, it's the right one. I want to change the random on this. So I think I have it set to be, I got a max value set, but I don't have a min value set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and on this min value, rotation min, I'm going to create a new constant. So I hold down the 3, click the left mouse button, it creates a constant, and I'm going to right click that guy, and I'm going to say convert to graph parameter. So as soon as I do that, it's called new property, conveniently, like, okay, great, whatever. But there it is, right? So I've just made a new graph parameter, and I can use that to pipe into my rotate min, and then I can go in there, and I forgot what axis this was on. Let me look at this guy and see. Yeah, it's 33. So if we take this guy and we do something like 88, now it's going to randomly rotate those doors between those values based on that new property. And I think if it all works, I can duplicate this guy, move it out, and you can see, oh, the graffiti moved, the doors have a slightly different rotation. This one's open a little bit more than that one. And that's kind of cool. Now also the debugger has the ability to see stuff directly inside of here. Like it didn't used to give you as much information as far as the tree of the graphs over here as it does now. And you can actually go in here and have it use this to take you to the actual object of which one you want to pick. So tons and tons of little workflow refinements just in the PCG graph creation window, right? Like that's really cool and super, super fun. So we're quickly running out of time. I've got 7 minutes, and like I said, we won't have time for Q&A. I'm sorry. But I will talk to everyone downstairs at the demo pods, and there's a bar next to me too, so it's like the best spot. So come hang out. It'll be super fun. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is biomes. So we have a biome tool. It's version 2, biome tool for 5.6. We call it Biome Core 2.0. It leverages all the improvements that have been made to the way the PCG system works. So the performance improvements it leverages. It stacks on top of that. And it has its own host of improvements to both performance and workflow. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of it really, really fast. Hopefully we have time to create a coastline after I give you a quick overview. And the way I'm going to give you the overview is actually with the sample content, because the sample that it ships with, it's an actual plugin. So you have to load in the Biome Core plugin as well as the Biocorm sample plugin. And that sample plugin will give you a scene and all the little stuff to kind of really see what's going on and understand what's happening with it. So I'm going to open that up. We're going to open up this sample level, and we don't need to save anything. And I'll give you a quick overview of what's going on with this guy. All right, so here's our world, and it's using the Biome Core. And you can see as I get close to this, that stuff starts to come in. All those little objects that are zooming in, these little spheres, the little things on the ground, those are all being spawned on the GPU, right? Like that's being generated on the GPU. So they're super, super fast, very performant, and fit into a small memory footprint, right? So that's a great, great thing, this GPU-based spawning. That's all built in using sort of an assembly workflow, right? Like you teach the tree how it's supposed to spawn its things. The Biome tool has been reworked. So the Biome basically has the Biome Core, which is the big box that floats around it. And then inside of those biomes, we've got all these other little biomes, right? These little squares are basically different types of biomes. And you can generate these biomes. If I bring up the outliner, this will make more sense. So you can have spline-based biomes. You can have texture-based biomes now, much easier than you could before. So you can use RGB values to paint 3 different colored masks or an alpha or any color you want. So you can do some texture-based stuff. And the thing that's really interesting about the biomes is the way that they're handling it is much more performant because the biomes themselves have the ability to take care of all the creation of the points themselves. So that happens locally. These are local biomes. They handle the creation of the points themselves, and then they basically report back up to the core biome, and that's where the spawning actually happens. And it's really smart about it, so it doesn't spawn double things and then try to cull them. All that stuff happens in the core. So the little local biomes report up to the massive core biome. The massive core biome handles the actual distribution of the actual creation of the points and the geometry and the things like that. Now, on these local biomes, you can have kind of recursive children relationships set up, and you also have blending relationships, like which biome has a higher weighting. Does the biome have a hard cut or is there a feathered edge? When it gets to the, its neighboring biome, how do you handle the transitional areas between those? And, they're all handling the things like when a biome spawns a tree, or when the rocks are spawned, the trees know not to spawn from where the rocks are. And all that stuff is kind of illustrated in this sample content. So get it, dig around in it, and check it out. And I think it'll make sense to you all when you play around with it. And it's just really, really fun. And there's several different types here. You've got this desert. I think there's, where is it? Somewhere in here is that. This one's cool. So this one's using, this is like a little farm one. Really, really fun. And where all this stuff lives, everything that's being made with that actually lives in the core biome. So in the blueprint section, this is really where you really want to get. Is in the blueprints, you're going to have everything to create all of these base types of biomes. You drag the core biome in, then you start dropping your other stuff in. And I'm going to show you that right now. We're going to build some cliffs back in that other scene. But that's a quick overview of how it works. And I've got 2 minutes to do this. I can do it in 2 minutes if my scene opens. And it's a big scene. It does take some time to open. I'm not going to lie. And I'm not going to hit play because the first time you hit play, it takes some time. It's 10 seconds after the first time, but the first time takes a bit. All right. You can do it. Let's go in here and get rid of my secondary. We'll just use the day model. Where are we going to go? We're going to go over here. We're going to hit 5. All right. It's the day, but it's not that good. Good grief. Let's get some sun on this. All right. What I want to do is I want to generate some cliffs, right? So to do that, like I said, you go into core biome. So in core biome, you go into blueprints. In the blueprints, the first thing you want to get is your biome core. So BP biome core. You drop it in. Then on top of that, I want to get a volume that I want to spawn stuff out of. So we're going to get a biome based on volume. We're going to drop that in. So this is a local biome, localized region where we're going to spawn stuff. And what we want to spawn on this guy, so if we go into our details, I'm going to just hit F10 and bring all that stuff back. No more world partition. We don't care about you. All right, so in this guy, we've got our biome. We're going to add a definition. This would let you visualize where those go. The definition process, you make these, you define them. They give you a color. It lets you. It's a kind of it's a workflow thing that helps you really see what's going on. I'm just going to. You don't have to have that, by the way. It would work without it, but I'm just turning it on. So we have two choices. We could load in an asset. So an asset would be like a pre-configured thing that you might use over and over in multiple local biomes. Or in this example, just to make it go a little bit faster, because I've got 40 seconds, I'm going to just use a local biome. And in this local biome, I'm going to add a local asset. That local asset is going to be index 0. We're going to give it a generator. So the generator, we're going to start with just shared rocks for now. That's going to randomly distribute stuff. These generators come with it. They're PCG graphs. They have some logic in them. They're already out of the box, pre-wired up for you in the sample content. And we're going to give it a mesh, and we're going to call this mesh cliff 3. All right, and just like that, okay, we're randomly distributing some Irish coast cliffs around there. Now, what I want to do is I want to use a different generator. I want to use a generator that is set up to find ISO lines. Where is it? Not shared rocks. I'm going to use my version of this. So there you go. And what that's doing now is it's finding the cliffs essentially. So if we double click on this and we play with some of these parameters, we'll bring up this instance. Doink. All right. So what I'm going to do is right now it's basically got here. If we display our points, you can see those are the lines, right? So what I want to do is you can tell it to be the top, the toe, the crest or the toe. We're going to do the inversion of those two, and we're going to turn this off, and we'll just give it more spacing. So we're going to cull some stuff out by making the spacing a little bit bigger. And I've got 50 seconds to do this. Something kind of like that. And just to speed it up, I'm actually going to make this be a little bit smaller and drop it down ever so slightly. Overtime, oh my gosh. All right, come hang out with me. I'll show you how to hook up the runtime thing downstairs. Thanks for your time, everybody. I'm sorry we went over. I appreciate it. I'm over by 2 minutes. I could have finished that in 30 seconds. It would have been 2 minutes and 30 seconds that I was over, and you would have saw grass on top of the cliffs, but whatever, it's fine. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy your Unreal Fest. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.